disclaimer, not that I don't want to answer, but some of the questions that I receive, they are very vast, so it's difficult to answer with a couple sentences. I can try to cover, and if if you hopefully folks who ask the questions are present here in the meeting, but if there is like a particular something that you want to ask about it, I can cover that. Other than that, this is also very organic, so we can
Yeah.
start talking and then start getting answers, and then we can just spin that and then start riffing, and then we start talking because it's materials. It's just so vast, and then these days, like you can make polyester from seafood shells. To be honest, and I'm
Yeah,
not joking.
actually,
Like literally, like yeah, seriously, it's you can do that kind of stuff. So
um,
and it's really hard to track down everything that's going on in the world, because there's always something new every day.
I'm glad you said that because I wanted to give that as well. If you guys, during the conversation, if there's something that, triggers you and you want to ask an additional question, use the hand button or put it in the chat and we'll try to incorporate it as we go. I do want this to be conversational, so feel free to talk. It doesn't have to be like just me and Martin. We will jump into the questions though now. And then also to his point, while he is a wealth of knowledge and definitely I would consider an expert, nobody knows everything. So he may not be able to fully answer every question, but he might be able to point you in the right direction. Um, so the topics that came through that were relevant to this particular conversation were activewear fabrics using natural fibers, innovation in the textile sector, and designing for circularity. So then the first question itself was, what properties should I be looking for in a good activewear fabric using natural fibers?
There's also a question in a comment. I basically read a lot, and to answer the question, how do I keep myself connected? Um, there's just a lot of uh, everything that's available on the website, and I don't just focus on fabrics. I have an engineering background, so I'm really into all these different, mechanical stuff that's going on, and even for design, I'll look at many things besides apparel. In fact, probably apparel is probably the last thing I'll look at, because I kind of know what it is, and I look at car designs. I look at motorcycles. I look at architecture. I look at different materials that they use, and I look at the innovations with sustainability that they use, and then whatever, even any chemistry stuff that's out there. Because a lot, if you talk about active, um, what's prevalent today is basically synthetics, and those are all derived from chemicals, polymers, and when I read about what's going on in Taiwan, or what's going on in China, what's going on in Vietnam, all of those have some sort of an effect on either availability of the microchips and of the chips for polyesters and all that. So I look at all that kind of stuff. So when I was working, this was helpful in trying to understand how to negotiate prices, because if there is a limited availability for polyester chips, for example, the price is going to go up. So I have to understand how that plays a role in that. So when I do negotiate prices with fabric mills, I don't just go randomly like, I want $2 off. They're like, are you kidding me? Like, we don't even have anything available right now. So that kind of stuff. So that's basically how I keep myself connected. Um, I do look at fashion, but very, very. I like to immerse myself in different disciplines. Whether it's design or innovations. I'm also a big technology geek, so it's like AI is like that's like the thing that I do these days, trying to get myself immersed in it, because I do expect that companies are going to start using that, which means there's going to be more layoff, there's going to be more automation. I want to be able to understand how or anticipate what that next job for me is going to look like, and the kind of new abilities that I can contribute. So anyway, so that's the answer to that question.
That was
And
the
then,
question in the chat, just for anyone who
yep.
missed it. It was, how do you keep yourself updated with the technology updates in the textile industry? And I do want to let you guys know, because there were comments and questions about Martin's use of AI. and Newark. We're gonna probably do a separate lunch and learn to talk about Newark, um, and whether I might try to get one of the founders to come and chat with us as well, but definitely Martin to show us, how he uses it and how he gets his great results.
Yeah,
Um,
they're pretty cool. They're pretty open. They reached out to me because I, like the geek that I am, I start messing around with it, and then they're like, oh, by the way, can we keep in touch? So they basically they just released a new version, but prior to the public release, they asked me to test it because I was playing around too much, and they realized like, what is this guy doing with this? So like, hey, can you test this out before we release it? I'm like, okay, sure, fine. So I keep giving them feedbacks even today, trying to find loopholes and shortcomings and all that stuff. So they keep tweaking it. It's just like it's fascinating what's going on out there.
I
So anyway,
love that you did that. I love that you played with it so much and then went the step further to give them feedback to try and make it better for you and for our industry.
yeah,
Um,
I'm
Sorry,
gonna
that's
ask them
off
to keep
topic.
it.
We'll go back to talking about textiles, but
Yeah.
that was
Anyway,
sorry. Okay, so the question that we swerved from was
active wear fabrics using natural
yes,
fiber. Okay.
activewear fabrics using natural fibers
So
properties.
it's this is actually an interesting question because I'm actually working with a former senior vice president who is really into this natural. He just started his own brand, and everything that he's doing is with natural fiber. So and he's gonna hire me pretty soon, but we talked about it. But basically, I didn't realize, even my sister, when I showed them the website, she's like, "Oh, great! There's no synthetic stuff." So with natural fibers, it's really hard. Um, you can't do anything to the DNA of, let's say, cotton, for example. Cotton is cotton, right? And it does what it does. It attracts moisture, it absorbs moisture, but it's really comfortable. And the reason why it actually, is comfortable and pretty supple to the skin is because of the amount of moisture it actually has in the fiber. So even if you compare this to a synthetic like nylon, for example, nylon is more hydrophilic than polyester. That's why when you have nylon in your leggings, it feels nicer and more supple. It's because the amount of moisture that it actually has. Similar to your skin. In the winter, like, I mean, I live in Wisconsin, like I get hangnails, my fingertips. I'm not gonna get into the graphic stuff, but my skin gets really dry. It's not, like it's rough, and that's basically what it is. So with active wear with natural fibers, you can apply some sort of finishes on cotton, for example, if you want some sort of performance. But what it does, it changes the hand feel, right? So you can apply a solution to make it more um, to wick moisture, for example, so it doesn't absorb as much. But it's the hand feel is going to be a little bit more brittle because you have some sort of solution on the surface, and that's why you're going to be feeling it. You can put antibacterial finish on there if you want to, but it does the same thing to the hand feel. So you can blend it, let's say with wool. That's actually one good ingredients for active. It is antimicrobial, so it keeps, like if you have that somewhat, it also softens up fabric actually. So it's really good for active, so that if you sweat and it doesn't stink as much, for example. Allbirds, if you know the brand, they're actually in trouble right now, but they were really big with wool blend synthetics, because what it does, so instead of using silver to make the fabric antimicrobial, which means it doesn't stink, they use wool instead. So it feels really nice and soft. And some of us probably think, well, my sweaters are made of wool and I sweat when I wear them. But it doesn't, wool, similar to some other materials, it doesn't just keep your body warm, but it's got like a natural thermoregulation feature or benefits. For example, it actually keeps you somewhat cool in the summer when you wear that. And if obviously, it keeps yourself warm, but the reason why it's also warm is because of the crimp and the fine hair and the fuzz that the yarn has. That actually traps dead air, which makes you warm. That's why sweaters are actually done with knitting instead of wovens, because what it does, all the loops, it creates spaces between the yarns, and it traps dead air, and that's what makes you warm. I mean, if you think about down jackets, it's the same way. The plumes from downs, basically, it got so many fine hair. That's what it does. It actually traps dead air. So it keeps you warm, right? And then you put that in your quilts and your jackets. That's what it does. So um, and then you can also use tencel for active fabric. It's cellulosic. It's made of wood and pulp and all that stuff, but it's also it's got moisture wicking feature. It's somewhat, I mean, you can argue that it's half natural basically, but it's also good because of the elasticity of the substrate. So when you move a lot, when you do a lot of these things, when you're active, it helps in the fabric. Basically, makes it allows you to move. Other than that, you can use bamboo. Um, um, that's also one natural ingredient that is. There's a lot of benefits, even though there's also a lot of cons against it. It's antimicrobial. Um, it's actually a lot more absorbent than cotton. It actually can absorb moisture 5 times as much as water. I mean, 5 times as much as cotton. Um, but
Bamboo
one
does.
of the downsides of somebody says
That was
something.
me. You said bamboo absorbs
Yeah,
5 times as much as cotton.
yeah, it can absorb more moisture compared to cotton. Um, but one of the downsides of bamboo is it doesn't dry as fast as cotton. So you stay a little bit, like basically damp. Um, so some of these things, when it comes to natural fibers, you can blend them. So you can actually, you can engineer the fabric and the contact ratio, and depending on what you want to do with it. Um, and then, you know, it's really hard to make um, um, any fabrics or yarns from natural fibers that are stretchy, because they just don't do that. It's and you can spin the yarn, and then you can knit the fabric or weave the fabric in a way that it allows flexibility, but it doesn't do as much flexibility as lycra. It's just, that's just the law of physics basically. So but then again, with if flexibility and modulus is what you're looking for from fabric, you can always use lycra, and there's so many different options for spandex, lycra, or elastane these days. And some are a lot more sustainable than others, and then there's like different properties, and um, to suit your needs basically. There's also recyclable, also recyclable basically, uh, synthetics, elastane available these days. I think there's one company called Creora or something like that. Um, there's a lot of options, and that's unfortunately is you have to use that for active stuff because natural fibers are not inherently elastic. So
Is
and
there
then
anything that you've done in your past as far as like a specific knit or weave that has provided more stretch?
um usually the go-to is jersey. um and most knits, you can also get into like double knits, and there's so many different interpretations, but typically jersey or interlock, that's like the easiest. Um, Jersey is a single knit, obviously, so you've got the loops on the back, and then you've got different construction in front. um, that's usually, when you do t-shirts, you can even do leggings, anything that's close to the body, or body hugging for that matter. But typically for leggings, you probably want to do double jersey, which is basically interlock. So then you can eliminate sheerness, because jersey is sheer, because it's a single knit. So when you wear leggings, for example, and you wear them tight, it's going to stretch the fabric. You can see your skin basically. But interlock is double of that basically. So you don't typically have that much issues with sheerness. Um, and then it also depends on the size of the yarn, and basically you just have to figure out what you want to do, what the garment wants to do for you. That's how you can construct it. With
Can you give an
Uh,
example? Like, I don't know. Does anybody have an example that they want to throw out?
I have I have a client that's trying to do a legging, and they really like wool, but they are trying to they really want it to be a rib knit, but I feel like the rib knit that they've selected is just way too stretchy to be a supportive compressive legging. And I think currently it's a wool spandex. There might be some other fiber in there. I can't remember.
Probably nylon, because you need that to
Yeah.
keep. It's like the dough when you make. You can talk about food because I can talk about food all day.
Martin,
Like when you're trying to make
Martin's
meatballs.
also a gourmet chef, by the way, guys. If you check out his
Oh,
Instagram,
I was gonna say meatballs because you need to put flour in there to keep the meat together. So basically, that's what it is with leggings. Like wool itself, it has its own benefits and goodness and all that, but it's not as structured for leggings as like nylon, something more substantial. So typically, you blend that with nylon or even polyester that also does that. So the question is, what do they want the leggings to do? Is it performance legging? Is it
you said
lifestyle
compression,
legging?
Jenny. Is it they're looking for a compression?
They didn't necessarily say compression, but they do want it to be kind of a performance legging. But I don't know like how performance-y they want it. Like if they want it to be like you could go skiing in it, or if you could go work out in it. I'm not really sure. I think for the purposes of this conversation, let's say just like a normal workout, like
Okay.
cardio.
So, you should look up All Birds. I think I mean, even though they're in financial trouble right now, but you can look at the websites and see the content. A lot of what they do is they use merino blend something synthetics. The merino does something, obviously, besides just antibacterial um, um, for synthetics. So it keeps it fresh and it keeps it like non-smelly. That's usually, if you have like an older workout polyester or nylon stuff, like, it doesn't matter how much dryer sheets you put in the dryer and then you store them away, you put them on like 2 days later to work out, it smells. That's because of the bacteria that live of synthetic stuff. So what wool does, it repels them because they just don't like wool. So that's how it keeps the whole thing smelling like normal. Same thing with silver or zinc. That's what it does. It just repels all these bacteria. So there's also you just kind of like you just have to figure the whole thing out with what they want to do with this legging. If they want the wool to be like a comfort feature, then you can probably use a certain amount of it in the content so that it makes, let's say, a nylon blend wool softer, softer than like a regular nylon spandex legging. You definitely want to have lycra in there because if it's compressive, that's what you want to do. And then if it's also like a supportive type of legging or like a shaping type of legging, you definitely want to use interlock construction, and then use smaller yarn sizes so they can actually pack a lot of it in there. That's what makes it supportive. Think about what's the best to describe this? If you have a bunch of different, like your hair, for example, like I can't use mine because I don't have any hairs, but like the more hair you have, the stronger it is. Like you have a strand of it, right? And as opposed to just like if you can picture one big thick hair, it's big and thick, but it doesn't have as much support as a bunch of different strands of hair. So similar to that. So you want to use, you can use microfilament, which is like smaller. Typically, your legging yarn size, if it's polyester, is typically 75 denier, which is very common. It's not too small, it's not too big, so you can actually pack quite a bit of it. So you can use something that's smaller. And the catch with this, if you have wool, is that you also have to figure out the kind of yarn size you can actually use with the wool, because it's not synthetic. You can also get you can only get wool yarn sizes in certain size, in certain diameter. Whereas anything synthetic, because it's man-made, you can make into so many different yarns, sizes, right? But with wool, it's like it's just wool. You can make it, spin it tighter, make it smaller, whatever that kind of stuff. But um, also how you can combine all these different contents and knit it, because the needles are also available in certain sizes. So you have to take that into consideration. And typically, if it's construction wise, if they're looking for rib, if it's just aesthetics, they like the texture, then what they can do is to do you can, instead of using interlock, you can do like a double knit construction, like a flat back knit. So you have the texture that they're looking for on the outside, and then the backside could just be a jersey stitch, jersey layer on the backside of the fabric. So that actually helps the modulus, so it helps the compression. It also keeps it from stretching too much.
Oh, okay. So interlock on the outside and jersey on the inside, and it's
No,
one.
you do a double knit. So double knit is
Okay.
you can make, like interlock is the double knit, but it's basically jersey on one side and another jersey on the back side. But you can
Oh.
also do jersey on one side and then rib on the front side. So ever heard of
Oh.
French rib?
Huh. No.
Okay. So French rib is basically flat back rib. So you look
Okay.
at the fabric, and you can do like 2x2, 3x2, whatever rib construction you want, on the face side or one side. You can use whichever side of the fabric you want, and then the back side you can ask them to knit a jersey. So you've got like a flat jersey on one side, and you've got rib texture on the other side. And you can use whatever side of the fabric you want, to be honest. So
I
so
don't
then
know about anybody else, but he just blew my mind. I didn't know you could do that.
I didn't either.
and
That's so cool.
and the other thing too is this is how you can engineer the fabric. Once you figure out if that's really what they want, then if it's compressive, then you can figure out how to construct that. So you can use smaller yarn sizes on the jersey side. So it's actually, it's got compression and it's got support. And then the front side could be, maybe it's just if it's just aesthetics, it's just aesthetics. But at least you've got something that's substantial enough on the back side. Excuse me. But you can also do so many different things with this. Like if it's just warmth that you're looking for, or a bunch of different things, you can actually do the wool more on one side as opposed to on the other side. So then it's closer to your skin. If it's more about comfort, then maybe you want to have the wool on the jersey side, if you're going to use the jersey side on your skin side, as opposed to on the rib side. So there's like all these things you can actually do. You can just like maneuver a whole thing. If this is what you want, then I can do this. If the rib is just for aesthetics, or if it's sort of like if you wear that as a legging, it's something that you want to touch and feel comfortable, then you can peach it, put some sort of brushing finish on it, so it feels more cozy to the skin. You can also do that on the back side of it if you want, because it's also on your skin, so.
Just to pause really quick, just in case anyone who isn't super familiar with fabrics, peaching is brushing a fabric surface to get it to be softer, kind of have more of a fuzzy finish like a peach.
Yeah, there's like different levels of brushing. Peaching is, it's just like peach fuzz basically. It's just like a little fuzzy. Even with that peaching finish, there's different levels of it. There's what they call micro peach, which is like, it's super shallow that you can know there's some kind of softness, but you don't see the hair like piling up. And then there's like a medium peaching, and there's like high peaching, which is basically almost kind of like light brushing. When you say brushing, it's basically you're breaking the yarns even more, so that you've got like all these fuzz, kind of like when you have your short hair kind of thing. You've got like all these things going on in the front of your forehead, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I think talking about finishes is something we should do too, so I'm going to write that down. And you mentioned zinc earlier. I've never actually heard of zinc fiber. Can we talk about that for a second?
So it's it's basically I don't think they can make yarn or fiber out of that, but typically it's just a solution that they put either on the yarn stage, and even there you can basically finish it on the yarn, after the yarn is extracted, or they can also infuse it into the yarn. So anything that's actually infused, let's say when you're trying to blend polyester with zinc or nylon with zinc. So what they do is when they infuse the zinc in the yarn, when the yarn is extruded, through all these nozzles, they they also inject particles of zinc in it. So it's actually
Okay.
in the yarn. So the benefit of this is that for as long as the yarn is around and intact, that feature is always going to be there. Whereas anything that you put on top, similar kind of like when you put lotion on your skin, you take a shower, the lotion is gone. Similar to yarns, they put if you put that on the yarn scale and on the yarn stage, it might last a little bit longer than say if you put the same solution on the fabric, because then you literally, if you apply it on the fabric, it's just sitting on the surface. Like if you I don't know, you crush your legs one too many times, 6 months later, the zinc, the solution is gone, the finish is gone because you keep rubbing yourself. And also when you sit down, like in all these things. So but then if you basically if you infuse it in the yarn itself, it's the DNA of the yarn. It's in there. It's just inherent. So yeah, zinc is that, and then silver. I know they make silver yarns, so you can take a fine yarns and then you ply it with a polyester or nylon or something like that, and then you knit that into fabric. You can do that too. Um, and then there's seaweed, for example, or crab shells, all these like seafood stuff. They have like all these different benefits now, and people start using them. And there's a lot more open-mindedness about it. That also creates antimicrobial feature, for fabrics and for yarns. And then obviously, they have to use chemicals basically to break down the pieces to make it into something that can be applied on a yarn or on a fabric. But that's one of the great things that people are looking into these days. The natural solution for, let's say, antimicrobial stuff instead of using chemicals, which was basically what we were stuck with in the past.
I was at Premier Vision earlier this year with one of my friends. I think she's on the call. I'm not sure. But we saw banana fiber, which was really interesting. And then we've been talking a lot about seaweed as well.
Pineapple, it's also big. In fact, it's big in Taiwan. A lot of these probably you get this from the Southeast Asian countries because banana trees, and basically they grow in warmer weather kind of stuff. And then pineapple, I didn't realize this. Pineapple is a big fruit in Taiwan. So they use the waste from pineapples, and it turned that into they have to. So basically, when you make synthetic fibers, you have to use carbon. So what they do is they extract the sugar, whatever that's left from the waste, and convert that into carbon. That's what they make the polymer for polyester nylon with. Similar to corn. If you've heard of Sorona yarn, which is a different type of polyester that DuPont makes, that's actually made from corn. They take the sugar from corn and then they basically convert that into carbon and then make polyester of that. So it's considered sustainable because it's plant-based.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean,
They
the
can do
options
that.
are crazy available these days. I think the biggest challenge is going against the establishment, similar to fossil fuel, right? People are, like fossil fuel is very well established. EVs and electric vehicles, yeah, it's making a push, but you've got like the big wigs that own oil refineries and oil, whatever kind of stuff. So you gotta basically, go through them, and the politicians, so it's available like pineapple stuff or Sorona yarns. That's kind of like a lot more available. They're available out there. It's just not available in the same amount of quantity as like regular polyester or nylon, because the what's available is very limited, and it's also a little bit more expensive. And people are not willing to invest yet in the infrastructures to make corn-based polyester, that kind of stuff. So
I don't want to derail our conversation, but have you heard of this fabric that's made from mushrooms. I can't remember what it's
Uh,
called.
yeah. All birds start doing that for their shoes. It's vegan leather, basically. So instead of using um, uh, polyurethane, so they take mushrooms and I mean, God knows what else that's out there. It's just like, yeah, that's one of them. They start doing that vegan leather. That's how
Mushroom
they
leather.
started. Yeah, mushroom leather um, and then I don't know what else that's available out there, but it's basically taking um, natural stuff and then converting them. So it's not there's definitely chemicals and process to make that, and you can't get away from that. It's just the secret ingredients. That's just the process basically. But what also is gaining basically how we define sustainability also plays a role in how we are being innovative. So even though, like for example, with mushroom leather, you have to use chemicals to do all that stuff, but how they're managing the chemicals, how it's being used, how it's being regulated, how it is being, let's say, the wastewater that they use, kind of thing, how that's being managed before being released back into nature, that's also part of sustainability. So it's not just as simple as let's make, polyester from corn, but the factories, the kind of water they use, how they distill the water, and how they manage the wastewater. How is that affecting the environment after it's being released back into nature? That also plays a big role. That's how there's this thing called blue sign, which is very common in active stuff. It's basically certification for, I don't want to say circularity, but it's basically how they look at the entire process from um, how they acquired polyester chips, for example, how that's being made, through how that's being supplied, to how it's being processed, to how it's being extracted into yarns, and how that kind of stuff. So it has to meet certain criteria and standards, sustainable standards, that is, for it to be certified as a blue sign certified. So, and that's probably the most economical. Um, the Gap, actually, if you look at their garments, you find a tag with a B on it. That's basically what it means. It's not necessarily all recycled stuff, but how they're making the garments, how they're making the fabric, the yarns, and all that stuff are environment friendly. Also labor friendly. That's the other thing that they're actually looking at too.
Quick question in the chat. Do you have any suggestions of some of your favorite resources or books that you could look into for learning more about these types of things that are happening in the textile industry?
I'm very fluid. I typically Google is my best friend. Just like go up there, and if you're really into all these active innovations, you can trade shows are very useful because you start seeing all these things. There's a couple of big ones. The Portland Fabric Fair, Functional Fabric Fair. Um, they have they also show in New York now, in addition to Portland. Those are like really good places to go into. It's not just reading it, but feeling it. Like you can sometimes you can pretend to be an important person and make an appointment. You start looking at the fabrics, just to touch it, just to talk to the fabric mills.
I want to pause you for 1 second. If you're not able to go to a trade show, they almost always have full access to their websites available, whether you have to register or not, or you can just log in. And then you can see who's presenting there, and you can check out what they have to say as well. You can go to their websites. I feel like it's a really underutilized resource, so I just wanted to share that really quick, because that's an easy way to figure out, like, if you were able to go, who would you see? What are they talking about? What are they sharing?
And also, a lot of companies, this is kind of like their thing. Like everybody wants to have a planet, and everybody wants to look like they're doing something for the planet, right? If you go to their websites, they usually have blogs. And these blogs, basically, they're trying to tell people, hey, man, we're also relevant. We're doing all these things for the environment, right? And then they start showing all these different things that could actually give you leads to like different things that somebody else is doing. And then they could be, basically just dropping all these hints like, oh, we're using, I don't know, recycled hair or something like that. from so and so. You can just Google recycle hair. I'm like, oh, so and so is making this. It just leads. It's just like a domino effect. And because it's what's also great today, especially in the era of social media, a lot of these smaller companies are popping up everywhere. They're basically, the more you're in tune with Instagram, for example, the more you're gonna find out about, like, I don't know, like creamy mushroom leather or something like that. It's like you're just like out there, you're like, what?
On that note, talking about Googling, one of my other freelance friends gave me this hot tip, which I felt like was like a dumb moment for me, but using Google News, like when you search in Google and then clicking on news.
Mhm.
So like you put in your keyword, whatever it is you're looking for. So say you looked at a trade show website and you looked at a company and they're talking about in their blog, I'm making something up. They're going to call like comfort thread. I made that up. And then you go on Google News and you're like comfort thread, and you click the news thing and it shows you everything that's been posted recently about comfort thread. And then it might be like you'll see the different companies or like whatever. So I hope that made sense.
I know a lot of most of us probably don't have access to WGSN, but if we do, that's a great resource basically. And I know they just merged. I can't remember what other website that they merged with, but they have materials report and then trade show reports. Those are like, I mean, it's so convenient because it's all within one source. You can go to the website and they have by season, they have what's going on now, that they have the forecasts for what's coming up and what's important kind of thing. So it kind of gives you, there's also another one called WTIN. That's also good innovation, mostly active inspired stuff. They have like crazy innovations that are just like, oh, somebody just woke up the other day and thought of this, and then somebody, like, that's on the radar. This could be like a good thing kind of thing. So, but they're all subscription based, so you have to pay for that.
Maybe we'll do a lunch and learn on like trend resources or like industry resources.
Yeah.
I just wrote that down, so I'll put it on my list. I am doing a list of additional lunch and learns, you guys. So like if you are enjoying this and you want to come to more or like hear about other topics, shoot me a note because I know a lot of people. I can try and find somebody to come talk to us. Okay, trying to get back a little bit on topic. I'm gonna read these 3 questions and then we'll start. But I just want to, just so we can kind of guide the conversation since we are running out of time. What is a good substitute for polyester if I want to use natural fibers in activewear? How do you think men's shopping habits have changed and in what way? And have you seen a demand for menswear customers looking for more sustainable options?
Okay. So what properties? Okay, well, it's kind of personal, but I guess we can have consensus about this. We basically want to feel comfortable, right? When we work out. So typically, when you're dry, even though you sweat, but you can sort of like take that away from you and keep your skin somewhat not too moist. That's how you feel comfortable, right? So there's so in that case, so you want something that sort of not necessarily removing, but probably help you stay dry or help manage the moisture, your respiration basically. So you can do this really well with synthetics, and then with natural fibers, for example. If we look at cotton, it doesn't wick, but it actually absorbs. So in a way, that also helps you stay dry because then your sweat is not on your skin, but it's also on the. It just moves to your garment.
Something right? Wet.
So yeah. So the thing is, I run. So I mean, little like I just get drenched even in the winter when I wear layers. It Even though you can say like, oh, it's quick drying kind of thing. Like I can take off my stuff. That thing like it's like a wet towel. You can just it doesn't dry basically. It stays on the fabric. So even with synthetics like polyester or nylon, but there is a rate of what do you call evaporation, moisture evaporation that they measure. So with synthetics, the rate is actually I don't want to say higher, but it doesn't take as long for it to dry up compared to cotton. It's like, because cotton is very hydrophilic, so it retains it more. Whereas polyester, for example, it's like it just stays on the surface, and then you run around, like 20 minutes later, you're dry. It's because the moisture doesn't get into the fiber; it just stays on the surface of it. So and then you can also engineer this, like for example, with natural fibers. Um, there are fabric constructions, let's say double knit, for example, right? You can actually do a mesh on one side, and you can do, let's say, a jersey on the other side. So what you can actually do is, what you can engineer the fabric so that it absorbs the moisture, but then it makes the moisture travel to the outside of the fabric. So when you run around, it gets basically dried out by the by the air, kind of thing. So even though it doesn't dry up quicker, it doesn't dry as quick as synthetics, for example. But that is like one way for you to kind of like dry up your clothes as you work out. So there's kind of like that system of pulling the moisture away from your body and then drying it as you go. So then so your shirt is not too wet, for example. It's not too soggy. So and then you can put if it's really synthetic fibers that you're looking for. So I think there's a lot of compromises. As I mentioned earlier, if you put solutions on there, whether it's anti-microbial to keep it smelling fresh, or wicking, for example, it changes the hand. There are better solutions today. So so you don't necessarily have something that feels like a sandpaper, but there's something that you have to basically compromise with natural fibers. You can, again, as I said before, you can blend that with either bamboo or wool or tencel kind of stuff, which helps a lot with the hand feel. It also helps with the performance of the fabric. It helps it dry a little bit quicker.
If you were to be like sourcing this, let's say,
like yarns, the fabric, you mean?
Yeah, let's just say that like one of us is working with a client and you're trying to source fabric like this. What countries do you think do it best, and like how do you suggest like talking to a factory about this?
Anything with innovations like active synthetic stuff, Taiwan is really big. Taiwan and China. All the fabric mills for active are mostly based in Taiwan and China. They started out with synthetics. That's chemical companies. There's a bunch of them in Taiwan and China. Taiwan in particular. So they're still they still have basically monopoly over availability. And typically, in Asia, India is not really good with synthetics. They've been trying, but they just don't have the infrastructure for it. And they're good with basically natural fibers, cotton and probably linen, that kind of stuff, even jute and hemp. But anything synthetics, it's basically Taiwan based. So the mills are basically there. I can name you a bunch of them, basically. They're all big suppliers for the big active brands like the Nikes of the world, the Adidas's of the world, and Lululemons of the world, that kind of stuff. They're all based in Taiwan. And then they have factories in China because the labor is a little bit less expensive than in Taiwan. So, and then you can actually, I think in some cases, Korea is, they're Korean companies, but their mills and fabrics are mostly in Taiwan and China. So, they're like Taiwan based and China based, even though they're Korean. And then, they can move things around like in Central America, for example, but only limited availabilities. But even like the polyester chips, for example, they have to import that from China. So they can be basically knitted, in yarn, so they can import the yarns, but everything still comes from Taiwan and China.
Are you seeing any trends as far as like, or I guess were you seeing any trends as far as like anything that was newer innovations getting cheaper finally, or is it still all pretty much like all the new things are still more expensive and they're not really slowing down? Connie, we'll come back to you in just 1 second.
Yeah, recycled stuff is getting more available and less expensive today. Like recycled polyester, for example, there's more availability today. than before. And even recycled nylon, it's more available today. You still have to, it's not cost neutral, so you still have to pay more because, it's just the process of it basically. But any of these new novelty ideas that we consider novelty, for example, um, like seaweed blend something something, it's not available, and it's hard to get, and the quantity is very limited, so there's a long lead time for that, and then you can only use a certain amount of it, and then you have to import that, and then you have to, like all these shipment, that kind of stuff, so that costs a lot. But typically anything that's recycled polyester is getting more affordable, and you start seeing more of that. But I think how this whole thing evolves is not so much about the recycle thing, but also one of the examples that I used earlier with like blue sign, because you know when you create recycled polyester, you still have all these processes you have to go through that involves chemicals, all these things, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really not sustainable.
Yeah, it's an extra process because you've got to take all these waste plastics, and then you have to purify that. That's a chemical process, right? In addition to just making it into another fresh polyester. So all these different things add up to the cost, and also basically it's another factor for the environment to deal with. So when they say something that's more, I guess when you say circular, this whole process, sustainable process, is part of it too. So I think that's what companies are signing up more for, that, like Blue Sign or Okitex, that kind of stuff. It's a lot more friendly to their bottom lines, their numbers and profits, because you don't have to spend extra money on extra polyester, extra recycled nylon, that kind of stuff. But it's more about, hey, we're managing the wastewater better, or the right way, kind of thing. We're not
The
dumping
right way.
I mean,
Connie, what was your question?
right way.
Well, you kind of answered already. It's kind of
Okay.
like about what you're talking about just now. I love that there's all these innovations, all this like alternative to leather, and it's great. But when you actually want to use it, it becomes very challenging. I think depending on the size of the company. So if
Yeah.
there's a company like it's a small company, they're trying to do it right, they're trying to be sustainable. But then when they try to use these innovative qualities, it just becomes really difficult. So it's kind of like kept for the brands that can like really afford it. And I was just wondering if anyone has come across any company that it's like offering lower MOQ for like smaller companies that are trying to use this type of qualities and they can afford it.
I ran into this when I was working for Kohl's, because they all think there's like this magic formula for us to be like, you see, everything is sustainable. Look at us, we're great. But what they're looking for is they just want to be recognized to be sustainable, right? But
Right.
if anybody into motivational speaking here, ever heard of Simon Sinek? Okay, so like when he started, he said something about he started back in the days when he just started getting into this whole motivational speaking thing. He would say something, "What's the why?" Right? So companies, if you really care about the environment, the way you speak it, they wouldn't look at the bottom lines that much. All these corporations look at their profits, their markups, their bottom lines, right? So say like, oh, we want to be sustainable because like, oh, by the way, like the millennials or the younger generations are into, oh my god, we got to cater to them, kind of thing, right? So they start doing all these work, like, oh my god, it's expensive. Then the whole thing, they ditch the whole thing. This is too expensive. That's not the why. Their why is the money. Their why is the profits. That's why anything that hurts their bottom lines, can't do that. I mean, no way. It's just too difficult. But if you really care about the relationship, right? You cook dinner for your significant other. You listen to them. You have conversations, kind of thing. Rather than, oh my god, I gotta hang out to my friends, kind of thing. So with these companies, like, they really care about the environments. They really want to cater to what their new customers are really into, and the way their lifestyle. They'll invest money in that. And the thing is, they have to rearrange their whole production thing, because everything is just basically so commercial and markup crazy friendly, right? Everything is about profit. So anything that takes um, a long time, or mushroom leather. My God, I'll just cook mushroom for dinner. Who cares? Mushroom leather is too expensive for my bottom line. Like, they don't care. But if they really care, um, it's about changing the like their DNA basically. But typically they do this when business is tanking. That's when they start panicking and then start gutting everything out, right? Look at what's happening to Nike, one of the biggest companies in the world. They are like tanking right now. They're restructuring big time because things just don't work out anymore. It doesn't matter how big and how cool and whatever that kind of stuff. People just stop buying their stuff. So yeah, exactly. They just laid off over 1,500 people like a few months ago. Crazy. They have to save $2 billion. So then that's when they're like, oh my God, yeah, let's go see a therapist. I guess relationship's not working out. Like, okay, let's start investing in something else.
Okay, I'm gonna pause for 1 second. I do want to let you guys know that I did book this for an extra half an hour just in case we ran over. So I know some of you might have to leave since we're at time. But thank you for sticking out with us for as long as you have. I know that we've kind of bobbed and weaved as we figured this out, but if you want to hang around, we'll keep talking. And if anybody else wants to ask a question, now is a good time since we're...
Yeah. We can also schedule a part 2 for this conversations, so then we can cover everything else.
Anybody have any questions they want to ask right now before I keep going? Okay. Thanks for hanging out. Okay, so one of the other questions was talking about shopping habits and customers looking for more sustainable options.
Wait, say that again? Which one is that?
I combined the two.
Oh, okay.
About men's shopping habits have been changing and in what way, and then is there a bigger demand for sustainable options?
I think, I've been in fashion for a little bit. I think American male customers are, they've evolved to be, you can say better. I can start, at least from when I was working for corporations, I could see the shift in what we were trying to develop to cater to male customers. And I think customers in general, even like the average Jane Schmo and Joe Schmo, they are a lot more educated, and they're more aware of what they're looking for. Women more so than men. That's just the nature, So, but I think, especially after COVID, and the trend of versatility is basically what fashion is all about. Obviously during COVID, it's something that, things you just don't go out. So you wear the same exact thing all the time. Then you don't want to keep switching your outfits kind of thing. And the same thing here. I think there are men who, most men, look at Lululemon, for example. They're big for a reason. And there's a lot of men who wear Lululemon stuff, right? So that's what they do is, even though they're becoming more performance-based athleisure stuff, but there's a lot of versatility in their garments. And there's a lot of things that the garments can actually do for them, And one of the ingredients that I mentioned earlier was elastomulti-ester. So back in the days, it's actually polyester. It's just a different type of polyester. But back in the days, that was the type of polyester that would be used for workwear because it has stretch. It's also abrasion resistant, and it's got and it blends well with cottons, for example. So a lot of the cotton polyester workwear that was prevalent back in the days was the polyester part was elastomulti-ester. So that's what Lululemon is doing. They put a lot of elastomulti-ester in their synthetic stuff. It also makes the garments more durable. So that's the other feature that a lot of the evolution of customers today. They don't want to keep buying clothes like every 6 months. They want clothes to last. They want durability, more money, out of more quality out of what they're paying for. So not just in turn, that's basically the trend from versatility to their pocket, right? They don't have to keep spending money every 6 months buying replacement stuff, and they want to feel comfortable. And I think over time people realize fashion, you shouldn't be miserable wearing clothes, and that's what it is: comfort, versatility, and it becomes like a lifestyle thing more so than just, um, I guess, like, and also wonder these days, like all those big fashion brands from the Versace of the world and the Pradas of the world. I'm like, who wear those things these days? Everything that I mean, look at us. I mean, look at what we wear. I wear t-shirts and then I have joggers underneath, and they're all extra. This is how I live. Cordy can actually attest to this.
I was going to say, don't let him fool you. He's been
it's
wearing
the
this
office.
for his whole life. Like, in the corporate office, Martin was the king of athleisure.
It's like it's so comfortable, and I think the same thing with us. Like what we wear, we want to look good, but we want to feel comfortable. But then we also don't want to spend, like hundreds of dollars on just outfit that can look good to do one thing, and then you have to swap to a different outfit to do like for another occasion, and then going to work, that kind of stuff, whatever. So I think versatility and durability and affordability, I would say that's what the evolution of customers.
Bye, Jenny. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Good luck with the wool legging thing.
Thank you. And thank you so much. This was
Yeah,
really
totally.
insightful.
Sure, you're welcome.
All right. Bye.
Bye,
Yep.
Rachel. Thank you for joining us.
And then more demands. This is always interesting because I do think sustainable options are in demand, but I don't know if it's except for probably a
This-
percentage of customers who are very conscious about it, and they'll look for that kind of stuff, right? But then I think with the main consumers, like the big side, the population, if the price tag is appealing and they happen to have some sort of sustainable something in it, they're like, okay, that's great, kind of thing. But it's not like a conscious, like, I'm only going to shop sustainable stuff. I'm only going to shop things that are, there are like the hardcore.
Yeah, I was going to say, this goes back to
customers.
your why conversation. Like,
Yeah.
the people who are very secure in their whys. Like, I'm going to buy sustainable because that's really important to me. That is my number one focus when I go shopping, is that I want it to be sustainable. Whereas the people like what you just said, the people who are like, I want the value, I want the versatility, and if it's also sustainable, then great. But they're not like, there's probably there's still that small contingent of people who are like, I'm not saying that vegans are looking for sustainable, but like people who are very staunch in their beliefs about a certain thing are the ones that are looking for that.
Yeah, and I do think when these folks, some of them are very brand conscious because that's how some of those brands establish themselves. They want to be known to be, like let's say let's use Nike for example. Like athletes wear them. Like if you're active, you wear Nikes, right? I mean, you could be like out of shape and all that stuff, but you wear Nike, you are healthy, kind of thing. But that's what they have in there. That's what the company's drilling in your head. So there's definitely brands out there that not just looking, but also living their business that way, and there's definitely followers for that. And I think those folks who follow companies like that, they swear by them. Like, doesn't matter, even if the color is off, they'll just wear them because that's becoming like a lifestyle to them. It's their ethos, right? And I think there's definitely folks out there, but it's also not inexpensive, and I think that's the big thing. And a lot of the other companies, probably the big department stores or the big brands that cater to the majority of the average Joe Schmo customers and Jane Schmidt, they just want to look at. They're not full, they're not basically sign up all the way because there's the bottom line they have to cater to. So I think the demand is always going to be there for sustainable stuff, but how it is related to the customers, whether it's price or whether it's it could be the causes kind of thing. That's I think that's what keeping it from becoming really mainstream, I would think.
Yeah, I think the changes too with like the legality of the fashion industry too, with the changes in the rules that are coming down the pipe. I see that eventually becoming more of the conversation than people who are actually being really passionate about buying sustainable. It's going to be more about, which companies are ahead of the curve, which ones are following the rules.
Yeah, and these companies are actually redefining sustainability. Like if you know Patagonia, we all know what Patagonia is doing, but then there's also like secondhand stuff.
Mhm.
So to them, that's also considered sustainable because you're not, basically throwing away your old garments to become waste, to get reprocessed, to get whatever, but they're being resold to because there's a market out there, people who actually want to buy those at less prices. So in a way, it's like you're keeping the garments, you're keeping the waste from the earth by still, like making the garments somewhat um, um, being used, so you don't have to throw them away, you don't have to recycle them, you don't have, that's because in doing that, you also, it's another process. That's another factor that challenges Mother Nature.
Are you aware of any companies that are using reusing garments in that way? Like I've heard of
Arc'teryx.
sorry?
Arc'teryx.
Arc'teryx, okay.
Yeah, so it's that's like a high performance active brand, but based in Vancouver. They have what they call a program called Regear. So they're buying old garments from customers and then reselling them. They're clean, they're cleaned out and all that stuff. But obviously, if you have old stuff, it's not brand new and spanking looking, whatever kind of stuff. So there's definitely wear and tear. But there's a market for that. They even have a special website for that. It's called Arc'teryx Regear. So that's what they do. They just resell the stuff. So instead of processing old stuff, which basically throw more chemicals into the earth, they just resell them. So keeping it from becoming another liability.
Okay. But as far as like taking actual garments and like deconstructing them and reusing them, do you know anything like that?
I think Patagonia has something like that,
Okay.
but it's not like a big thing. But they repair some damaged garments.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I forget what it is, but what the name of it, but that's one thing.
Yeah, I remember seeing there was like a jacket that I saw that was like a bunch of different colors. It was like color blocked because they had repieced it together.
And I know somebody was doing something with jeans. I don't remember who it is. So it's basically taking apart some old stuff and then using parts of it to fix some old jeans or something like that. I don't know if it's Levi's. Maybe it's Levi's. I don't know. It's one of those. Yeah. So there's like things like that happening.
I saw somebody asked a question about circularity. I don't know if they're still here, but I just want to come to that topic for a moment. Martin, I don't know how much you know or invested in circularity, but I heard a really, really interesting talk when I was at Premier Vision earlier this year, just about like how true circularity has to be broken down really at the beginning, like when you're designing. Like you have to think about how your fabric can be broken down, all your components can be broken down, the buttons, the zippers, like all of that stuff, like how it has to, when the garment has served its purpose and it can no longer be used, how is it broken down to be able to be reused? Because that's true circularity. And that was
and also
really
the packaging.
Yeah.
So there is this. It's an English brand called Pangaya. Here I'll send it in the chat. So their packaging is actually biodegradable. So they even mention it in like when you go to the landing page for any of their garments, they put that in the description and the instruction how to dispose the packaging. And I actually is this yeah, hang on, is this the main? Oh no. There's also some I've seen some fabrics, and they're actually coming out of Taiwan, that are even synthetics that are biodegradable. So so they have to engineer that in a way that in the presence of something else that's common in soil, for example, it would trigger the part of the chemicals that's in the yarn, so that it actually works with those elements in nature, in soil, to decompose synthetics. So I mean, at the end of the day, synthetics in the plastic, it's made from, like carbon. Carbon is nature, right? So they take that, they try to figure out a way so they would actually decompose back to sort of like, like how oxygen would just
something
be processed.
natural. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
All right, people that are still with us, does anybody have anything that they want to ask or add? Martin, is there anything else that you want to cover?
No. Did we answer everything? There was what is a good substitute for polyester if you want to use natural fibers? I think I did speak about that
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna skip the 3D questions. We'll come back to that in a separate one. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much we didn't talk as much about like sourcing. Is there anything around sourcing that you want to share?
Yeah. If you need some contacts, especially for active stuff, I know a bunch of mills, and I have pretty good working relationships with them. I can always refer you to the salespeople there if you have any like questions, or if you're interested to source certain things.
Martin is a wealth of knowledge, so he just opened it up for you guys to message him. So take advantage of that.
There was that email that went around. You can just reply to me, and
well, I BCC'd everyone, so
oh, okay, yeah, that's right.
if you're that open to it, I can share your info.
Yeah,
when
no,
I send out
that's
the
totally fine,
notes from this.
Yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can always reach me there too.
As far as sourcing goes, do you have any tips, just as far as like building relationships, talking to people, what kind of questions to ask?
Well, typically, if you're like a small business, there's sometimes the odds are stacked against you. I think a lot of times, because they don't know you, right? I mean, for example, if you're the Gap, like they know the Gap, like they know where the office is. So and more times than not, the favor is actually working against the fabric mills, because all these big companies have leverage. So it's like they would bend over backwards for you to do everything. But if you're a small business, for example, you just have to establish they just want to make sure you're legit and you can actually pay the order. That's basically it. And there's like minimums, and then for quantities and colors and whatever, and then developments, that kind of stuff. If you're just buying fabric from their line, that's a different story. As long as you can actually pay, then that's all they care about. And I think having some sort of relationships when working with them, like trust, for example, that's just human nature, right? It takes it goes a long way, to be honest. If you meet them at fabric mills, fabric shows, fabric trade shows, kind of thing, see in person, you start talking to them. Most of them actually have representatives here in the U.S., so they should be able to help you. That helps a lot with working relationship. And I think a lot of companies, a lot of fabric mills, they get a lot of times they get skewered a lot when they work with big corporations. So treating them like these folks actually work. They have to make money. They have to. So respecting in some ways, can go a long way. So and I think you can also see when you work with these fabric mills, how they treat you. Also speaks about the kind of integrity they have as a company, as because it goes both ways. It's not just you have to respect them, and they also have to respect you. It doesn't matter whether or not you're a small business or a $6 billion company, whatever the case is, because you're still human beings. I mean, especially when you're small businesses. And sometimes, perfect example, Lululemon. So how they started one person, right? And he went to Taiwan. Apparently, he knows the fabric. It's a what do you call a vertical fabric mill. So they make the yarns, whatever that kind of stuff. They produce fabrics, and then they also make garments. It's called Eclot.
One pause. Does anybody not know what it means to be a vertical mill?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Raise your hand or throw it in the chat. Just if I don't get an answer, I'm going to assume everyone knows what it means, and we'll move on. Okay. So can you explain what that means?
So vertical mill, basically, they can actually produce everything from the chemicals to make let's say if they want to make polyester fabric, right? The chemical company that produces polyester chips, they look like chiclets or Tic Tacs, basically, like capsule, and then they melt it to make the yarns. So they have the facilities to melt it to make the yarns, and then they would take the yarns and then knit the fabric, whether it's or weave the fabrics. They have the factories to do that, and they also sell them.
So the short answer is like they have control and they have the ability to do every step of the process to do what they need to do. And there's some people who have the ability to start at where Martin's saying all the way to fabric production and shipping
and making garments. And then sometimes that's complete vertical. So there's also companies like that.
Mm-hmm.
Eclot is one of them. So how Lululemon started, this one person, I forget his name, but he's no longer. I think he only owns shares. He knew the guy, like one of the big wigs at Eclot, the Taiwanese mill, and then garment makers or whatever kind of stuff. Basically, he wants to make certain things, and then he basically started with Eclot, and then Eclot just took it and ran with it, and they interpret the whole thing, and then I guess the guy had a little bit of money, so he paid. Started with a couple of pieces, making it, that kind of stuff. And then the next thing you know, like several years later, like Lululemon is as big as it is today. So that's the kind of relationship. So I think, that kind of stuff, similar to how we just want to be treated as human beings, like if you're respected, that, people honor you as a person. But the same thing with fabric, with working relationships. These people actually have something invested in you, and they know you, and they understand how you're just legit, and the same goes the other way. You can basically, like some of these mills, in fact, this is funny. I try to treat people that way. One of the fabric mills I used to work with, they're actually coming to Milwaukee to see Coles. They actually reached out to me like, hey, can we have dinner? I'm like, okay. So I'm assuming it's going to be free. But anyway, in any case, so that goes a long way because I'm still in touch with one of the salespeople who don't work there anymore. Like we would text each other over time and it's like, hey, I'm doing this kind of thing, that kind of stuff. So it's like you just trust them. And that goes a long way with working relationships. And sometimes, a lot of times when you have that trust, if you have a small order, they'll be like, yeah, man, I'll cut you some slack, like I'll do this favor for you, even though they know you can't pay or they can't, you can't compete with all these things. But they're like, I just,
they know you're a good person and they're, I think that's really important. Leading with like respect and knowing that you're talking to another human being and building those connections. I've talked a little bit to other freelancers just about sourcing in general, just to like share with the rest of the people in the room. And talking about developing relationships before you need them. So like start talking to if you're sourcing, start talking to these people before you have a client, before you have an order. Learn about them, develop a relationship, talk to them about the things that you might want to know in the future if you were to have a client. So that when it comes time, that's not the first time you're talking to them. And then I think also like leading with curiosity, I think is really important. So to Martin's point, like when you're going to talk to these people, if you're at a trade show or whatever, be truly interested. Ask them questions. Learn about them. Because that's going to lead you to have those respectful relationships.
Yep. Oh, Fernanda, I'm answering you. Yeah, so I just happened to notice the chat. So the upcycled garments.
Was Fanfare?
Is that?
I'm not familiar with
that.
Is that
Pangaya? Is that the one that uses biodegradable packaging and all that stuff? Or
no,
Martin, hi. No, actually, Fanfare is a brand like from the UK that actually upcycles a lot of different garments.
Oh,
And
I see what you mean. Okay.
they made like they make I want to say not tailor, but they kind of like made unique pieces. So they work with previous garments, and I got
Oh, I
that
see.
from when you were talking about brands that actually work with upcycle garments.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah. Not familiar with that brand. Thank you. I'll check that out.
Sure.
I posted
sorry.
the link in the chat just because I looked it up really quick. It looks interesting. I'm not familiar with that brand either. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I think that in Europe, there's more of when you were talking about sustainability, like there's way more options in terms of sustainability. And of course, like it has to do with all the regulations that are really more strict right now. And they're really leading on the way, I think.
Yeah. A different mentality altogether, completely.
Yeah, I guess I should have said that before too. Like, I don't actually know where everyone here is from. We could have, Fernanda, are you from outside of the US?
Well, I am originally from Argentina. I live in Canada, but I actually happened to make a certification in sustainability in Italy.
Okay.
And when you learn about the sustainability, circularity, and how all these things apply, which is really interesting because you actually mentioned that, Martin, about like how each brand interprets sustainability and how everyone interprets sustainability. Because when you see it from the corporate perspective, it's mostly I want to say often it's just the bottom line. But when it's from the consumer perspective, it's so much broad and there's so many things on the table. The price is usually the big one because it's a deal breaker, but there are other things that play into making the purchase decision in those terms. But when they explain about I remember the first thing, and it's really interesting because you're bringing Lululemon all the time. The first thing that they asked us when we started was, can you bring a sustainable clothing from your closet? And it was so cool because everybody brought like everything. Like, everybody brought like so many different things, and the reasons that everybody had for it to be sustainable were so different.
Yeah.
But it made it like cool to see how we actually have, not that we don't have knowledge, but we have different perspectives, and that is actually shaping the way things are being are changing the things right now, I think.
That was really interesting. I kind of like that as a brainstorm or a process to just like everyone kind of talk about their sustainable item and like what makes it sustainable. I feel like there's a lot to be learned there because yeah, I don't know. Sorry, that's just random thought from myself.
All right. Okay, we got 3 minutes. I love to hang out, but I have to go. I have a phone call that I have to field in about 15 minutes. But we can do part 2, or if we can, if you want to do another session for something else with 3D and all that, whatever, just let me know.
Yeah, we'll definitely do the 3D one. If there's more interest about talking more about fabrics and things, we can run back on that. And yeah, I'll share Martin's information to everyone. So if you guys have more specific questions for him, you can feel free to reach out to him.
Yep.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and I appreciate your time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye guys.
Bye.